I'm super excited to introduce, today's session and this webinar, this technical workshop, which will be facilitated by Tabitha. So Tabitha is an EiR at Africa's Talking Lab. So EiR is Engineer in Residence, and today she's going to talk about using analytics in the product development lifecycle. And hopefully you're going to benefit from this. So Tabs, over to you. And looking forward to an insightful hour. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, MJ. Thanks for inviting me and for having me. I think we've known each other for quite some time. I just realized how long it has been since you still use names I haven't used in a while. For this session, I am Muthoni. And I'm happy to be here just to be, and we'll try and have this session as interactive as I possibly can have it, just trying to think about analytics and building products. So data and metrics and information allows us to peer through the haze of uncertainty that surrounds a lot of product development and a lot of business development. So today I'll try to take us through different frameworks that are very key in terms of thinking about analytics, and just trying to guide us through high-level thoughts and high-level planning within product development. As MJ mentioned, my name is Muthoni, and I'm... One moment. Okay. Hello?
Keep going, apologies.
Oh, okay, no worries. So I'm here because I love data. I love trying to make sense of data. And in terms of my background, I have a background in actuarial science. I'm currently pursuing a master's in computational intelligence, but I've been in the data space for almost 6-7 years now in different capacities. So I'm excited to be trying to bring this whole conversation around how to build products and how to use data in product development. So it's estimated that by this year, so in 2020, it was this was research that was done quite a while back, that every person on Earth would be producing up to 1.7 MBs of data every second. And we've already had experts confirming that data is more valuable than oil. And unlike oil, data is able to travel across all corners of the world in milliseconds. And despite this being very catastrophic to the environment, since the data that we produce is not necessarily stored on a hypothetical cloud, but in actual data centers, which consume quite a bit of electricity. So like all the data centers in the world consume about 3% of electricity that is produced. And this is almost all the electricity that is used in the UK, for example. This means that we're also emitting quite a bit of greenhouse gases. And so it's imperative that we begin to think about the data that we create and how to make sense of it, how to use it effectively, and just starting to have conversations around this. So as we've seen, everyone has data, and the key, just as we see on this slide, the key is in figuring out what pieces help us to improve in learning, what pieces of data help us to improve in decision making. So everyone knows that they need metrics, but finding metrics that are smart, and these are metrics that are specific, for example, to a specific product space or a specific problem space, metrics that are actionable and relevant and timely is quite a bit of a challenge, and we'll be trying to explore this during this session. So I will try and take us through a few business or product models, as well as different stages in growth when you're thinking about developing products. And this largely inform the decisions that you make in terms of analytics and the decisions that you make in terms of the metrics to measure. Then towards the end, I'll speak a bit about how to think as a data scientist when you're building your products. And then hopefully we'll definitely have some time for Q&A. So as we start, I would like to hear from maybe one or two of you, and this could be MJ and someone else, but feel free to, I think, raise a hand or just speak if you can. how do you guys build products, both at Andela, and if we have guys joining who are not from within Andela, how do you think about product development? What life cycles do you go through? And yeah, anyone can answer this in terms of product development life cycles.
Good question. Let me just pick someone up from the participants. Magana is in Andela, so if you have a response, it would be nice to hear from you. Okay. Chris Nyaga. I'm just picking someone from Andela, but like if you're not Andelan, feel free to unmute yourself and just chime right in.
Yeah. Guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. I am Muthoni. So let's see. I think an example of how I've seen some teams operate in Andela, I've worked in the technology team internally, and a few different approaches. I think one thing I've seen happen across teams is keeping your users informed, or at least roping them in as early as possible. We've had setups where we bring in, we do what we call like integrated Scrum teams, where it's not just the engineering Scrum team, and you can have conversations with people from different departments, say engineers, managers, and all sorts of people who interact with the products themselves to give us a good idea of their day-to-day and that sort of thing. So just basically collecting a lot of information prior to creating or like having draft out details of what sort of features and product areas you want to explore. And then beyond that, it's I'd say, a decent attempt at Agile, where creating work ahead of time, having sessions with engineering and product to clarify the scope of what can be done, ensuring that it ties into the goals of, say, the company or the department at large. And then the rest is mostly engineering related, where like grooming work, doing actual engineering, work going into QA and testing, having release cycles, and having release communication where after you've delivered something, then just following up with user guides, Q&A sessions, and that sort of thing to just help new features get better adoption.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Chris. Would anyone else want to mention how they think about, I think that's very interesting what you've mentioned, just the whole cycle. So if anyone else would want to mention how they think about building products, I can take one more person. Yeah, you could raise your hand or just go for it. And if there's no one, I think I can continue. Just trying to make sure there's no raised hand. Okay. Sawa. So the lean analytics kind of the lean startup cycle gives quite a bit of a framework for many product development cycles, and I sort of used some of the ideas from that to build on today's session. So when you're thinking about creating a new product, you're sort of starting with an idea that you have, then you build that idea. So you use code to build a product, then through that you're able to collect data at different stages that then help you to learn and to iterate the product as you go on. So then there are different business models. Just aside from thinking about what the building product cycle, there are different business models which then define a different, and we'll see the models in a bit, but the different kind of product models and the stages of growth that you're in will influence the kind of metrics and the kind of analytics that you look into. So broadly, these are the main kinds of products that we have. We have e-commerce products where you're trying to get customers to sell through your platform. This could be Jumia or Masoko or Amazon and all these kinds of things. Then you also have software you could be in the business of offering software as a service, where then you're selling software to your clients, or you could be building mobile applications, or you could have platforms where you want users to generate content. So this could be the likes of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and these kinds of platforms, or where you yourself create content and then expect people to consume this content and you generate revenue through advertising. Or you could have two-sided marketplaces where you bring together buyers and sellers to be able to interact on your platform. Then in terms of the stages of growth, and I just mentioned these two things because, for example, if you're an e-commerce kind of business, the way you think of analytics is very different from how you think of analytics if you're trying to generate revenue through in-app purchases in a mobile application. So something else that's very important to know is what stage of growth you're in. So if you're at the empathy stage where you're just starting out to build your product, it's important to speak to your customers, to understand what the problem is, to understand how to solve that problem. Then when you move to the stickiness stage where it's very clear what the problem is and how the product fits into the problem, then you're trying to look at how well do customers engage with your platform. For some platforms, you want to have daily active users. For some platforms, you're okay with just having monthly use and that kind of thing. So it's important to identify what's important for your platform, and we'll see these things here in a short while. So if you're at the third stage where you're thinking about user acquisition and growth, this stage is the virality stage, and you're focusing more on acquiring more users now that you have a good product fit, and you're also focusing a lot on growth. The kinds of analytics that you need there, the kinds of data that you want to collect is also very different. Then once you're able to do that, then you move to trying to generate revenue. You want to be able to build a product that is scalable and a product that can consistently sustain itself. And you're looking at also very different kinds of metrics. Then once you move to the scale phase where you want to reach wider audiences, if this is a product that you are maybe testing in Nairobi or in Kenya, then now you're thinking about the rest of Africa, you're thinking about the rest of the world, so new markets and those kinds of things. And the analytics that you use for this will be very different. So as you see there, the model plus the stage of growth that you're in drives the metrics that you track. So as we think about metrics, I'd like to mention a few things. And the first is what makes a good metric. Then we'll also look at vanity metrics. I also like to call them clout metrics, and we'll see why in a bit. Then just different types of metrics and how to think about them. We'll mention briefly about A/B testing and multivariate testing, about cohorts and segments, and then then we'll see how much time we'll have to do the rest. So a good metric, when we think about a good metric, it should be able to be comparable across different kinds of things. You should be able to compare this metric across times, across different users, across competitors, and it should help you to understand what is changing within your product. So for example, if someone tells you that there was a 2% increase in the conversion rate from last week, then that's a good metric because it's meaningful. It's comparable across time. It's comparable across different things that you're tracking. But if you just have a 2% conversion rate, then it doesn't really communicate much. So in terms of metrics, when you're thinking about the data to collect and the metrics to track for your products, it's important to note that if people cannot remember the metric and if they can't discuss it, then it's much harder to to turn it into a change in features. It's much harder to turn it into a change in culture. So finance people really like to use rates and ratios. And the reason for this is because, I think I have question. Okay.
It's not a question, but I'll look through.
The distance you travel is just information, but the speed, which is a distance per hour, is something that you can act on, because it tells you how fast you're going, it tells you about your current speed, and then you can decide whether to go faster or slower. Ratios are also inherently very comparative. So if you compare a daily metric to this years, then you're able to see whether there are trends, whether there are sudden spikes in what it is that you're measuring. So back to the driving example, if you're driving, speed is one metric, but speed right now versus the average speed in the last hour will show you whether or not you're accelerating or you're slowing down. And depending on how fast it is that you want to get to your destination, then you're able to make a decision. So ratios are also good for comparing factors that are somehow opposed. So assume you have a product that has two versions of it. You have a free version of the product, and you also have a paid version of the software. When you're thinking about revenue, you get to a place where you have to make a choice. Do you offer the premium features for free in order to acquire new customers, or do you reserve them for the paying customers? And how does having the full set of premium features for free affect sales in the long run? So you need a metric that will be able to combine these two, so that you're able to understand how change in the different things affects your business. So when we are thinking about metrics, I think one key takeaway from this session would be that it's important to ask yourself, first, what will you do differently based on the change in the metric, based on the change in the data that you're collecting? Because a good metric, at the heart of a good metric, is that it changes behavior. It helps you identify features that are important to the products that you're building. So accounting metrics, for example, such as the daily sales revenue, monthly sales revenue, are important because they help us to make predictions about the products that we are selling. And then experimental metrics, or metrics that are from the results of a test, help you to optimize on a product, to optimize on pricing, and to also optimize on the markets that you're in. So as I mentioned, a change in a metric should significantly change your behavior. And it's very important to agree on with your team what the change will be before you collect the data. So for example, if the blue website generates more revenue than the red one, then you're definitely going blue. If you have half of the respondents in a survey say that they won't pay for a feature, then you have decided that you're not going to build that feature just from the very onset. So I'll give you a few examples. Why is this not moving? Okay, yeah. So let's think about this metric. And this is from a recently published book that's called No Filter by Sarah Fryer. And she just explores how Instagram sort of reached the level where they influence business, and they are in the business of manufacturing coolness, and have done this coolness and influence, and have done this in a way that has changed how a lot of us do things. So in terms of their users, Instagram gives users 3 simple measures. That's the follower count, the following count, and the number of likes. And for some of us who use Instagram religiously, you probably know like right now, you know how many followers you have, you know how many people follow you, and you know on average how well your posts do. So the interesting thing about this is that these feedback scores are enough to make the experience with the users thrilling and to some extent addictive. So with every new like, with every new follow, there's a rush of satisfaction, there's a rush of dopamine to the brain for almost each and every user of this platform. And I think as people who build products, we should also think of metrics in this way, that they are metrics that affect. So for example, if I like to post cat videos and have identified that anytime I post a picture of my cat, I have 100 likes. And when I post a picture of my food, I have 50 likes, then I'll definitely change my behavior towards the kind of content that I create. And having this kind of clear metrics means that you're able to inform your product decision process. So let's look at Facebook. With Facebook, they automatically catalog every tiny action that you perform on the platform, not just comments but clicks. It's the words that you type and then delete, it's the words that you type and then hit send, it's the posts that you hover over when you're scrolling and don't really click, it's the posts that you click on, it's the name of your ex that you search and then don't friend, or it's the people that you search for and then block. Every bit of that information is collected, and this data is used to figure out who your closest friends are, and then through this they're able to identify the strength of your relationship with different people, and they call this a friend coefficient. So for example, if I like to see MJ's posts on Facebook and I will always click on her posts and engage with them, then it means anytime I log onto the platform, it's MJ's posts that I see first, because we have a higher kind of friend coefficient. If I don't like to see the posts that maybe my brothers or mom shares on the platform because they're maybe old, embarrassing photos, then definitely those will come towards the end of the timeline. And with Facebook, it's not just about personalization of the timelines. They're also looking at advertising, targeting in terms of advertising. So you can really see that the business model and the stage of growth is really, really driving what it is that they track. So before we go to types of metrics, let me see if there's a question. Yes, presentation. Okay, yes, I'll share the presentation and MJ will also share the recording. Okay, and in case you have a question, you can type it on the chat and I'll get to it immediately. So let's look at a few types of metrics. We have qualitative and quantitative metrics. And with qualitative metrics, these are based off of a hypothesis that you have. They're also unstructured and very anecdotal. It could be that I believe that my female, that users on my platform who are feminine prefer rose gold as a color, and men prefer a certain kind of navy. And this is very hypothetical, but then it's something that you're able to track, and we'll see how to track these kinds of things and how to use them to inform product design. So with quantitative metrics, they involve numbers, they involve statistics, but they just provide hard numbers but less of insights. So combining qualitative and quantitative metrics means then you're able to generate insights that you can act on. Then we have exploratory metrics that are very speculative. They help you to identify insights that you didn't know about the products. This could be that users on Chrome or users on Safari don't just add a product to the cart, that they actually proceed to checkout. It could be that users who pay via M-Pesa pay pay more than users who use a credit card, and those kinds of things. But these are things that you don't know until you start looking into the data. Then we have reporting metrics that are more day-to-day, and they help you understand how the business is doing, how the product is doing. Then we have leading and lagging metrics. Leading metrics will give you predictive insights into the future. The lagging metrics will just basically tell you what is happening. So users, you have trying to create their needs. But lagging metrics are also very important because they provide a framework on which we measure the future through. So assuming we launch a product today, then if we start tracking the behavior of our users today, then 1 year down the line, we have a good baseline of how well an engaged user behaves on our platform, how a user who's about to drop off will be engaging with the platform. So both of them work, they complement each other quite beautifully. Then we have correlated and causal metrics. If two metrics change together, then they are correlated. And if one metric causes another to change, they are causal. Let me explain this. Say you find a causal relationship between something you want higher revenues, and something that you can control, which is the ads that you show to your users, then you're able to, just by knowing that these two have a causal relationship, then you're able to play along with different things. You're able to have different kinds of ads. You're able to have different kinds of positioning of the ads until you find something that gets you to the kinds of revenues that you're looking for. So analysts often will look at specific metrics to drive the business. We have key performance indicators in every industry, and every product actually has like baseline KPIs. So if you're in the restaurant business, this could be the number of tables you serve when things are going well, when things are not going well, just based off of that one number. If you're an investor, then this could be the return on your investment. And it's one thing that just that one number that you look at and you know that things are okay or things are not okay. If you're a media site, then this could be ad clicks and so on. Then we'll look at vanity. Okay, yeah, we'll look at vanity metrics and how to avoid them. I also call them clout metrics. So many companies claim that they are data-driven. Actually, everyone claims that they are data-driven. But unfortunately, while we may be collecting a lot of data, very few people are driven by data. If you have a piece of data which you cannot act on, then it's a vanity metric. It just strokes your ego and it doesn't help you in any way. So you want data, you want the data that you track to inform decisions. You want it to guide and to help your products grow, and to help your users also have a great experience on your platform. So whenever you see a metric, or whenever you're considering a metric to track, ask yourself, what will you do differently based off of the different changes in this information? If you can't answer that question, then maybe you shouldn't be worrying too much about that metric. If you don't know what metrics change behavior within your product development cycle, then maybe you aren't, not actually maybe, you're not very data driven. So examples of vanity metrics that we like to track are, say, the total number of signups. The number can only increase over time, right? So if you have a product, signups will just keep going high unless you're doing something wrong. But it tells nothing about what the users are doing. It doesn't tell you whether you're adding value to them in the long run. And guys could just sign up and vanish forever. And total active users, assuming you can define who an active user is, may be a better metric, although to some extent it will be vain because it definitely will increase over time time unless you're doing something wrong with the product. So real metrics or metrics of interest should be actionable, as we've mentioned. So what percentage of the users are active? What percentage of the users show the level of engagement that you expect within a product? If you're building a game, how many people sign up on the game, and how many people actually play the different levels that you have? And what are their experiences at the different levels? At what point do people drop off? And this way you're able to learn and to experiment and to iterate within the product. So also note that actionable metrics are not magic. They don't really tell you what to do, but they help you to track the different effects of the changes within your product. So when you're thinking about building products, sometimes you don't really know, and even when you really know what your users want, within the data, you start to identify more interesting insights or things that you didn't anticipate to be how people will use your product. So you could build a product that, I think I'll still use an Instagram example, where it's ideally a platform to share photos and images, to capture memories and those kinds of things. But there's an interesting use where people will go onto Instagram, upload a picture, apply the filters on the picture, and then save the picture and not really post it on your platform. So that means people are using it as a Photoshop of sorts. So, but you can only know this once you're tracking different kinds of things. So these are 8 vanity metrics to watch out for. And when you think about vanity metrics and clout metrics, think of if you're trying to sell shoes or handbags on Instagram and you have 1 million followers and you follow 1 million people, and every time you post a new bag, only 2 people like, and only 1 person actually gets to the point where they check out your website or ask you how much is the bag and those kinds of things. So it's just things that are nice to look at. It's just things that people see and think, okay, interesting. That person is an influencer maybe, or that product is a good product. But at the end of the day, when you go back to the real numbers, how many people bought, how many people engaged, then no one is really there. So let me see how much time we have. Okay. Yeah, so these are a few vanity metrics. For example, with the number of hits, if you have an app or a website that has very many objects on it, then you definitely have a big number. Maybe you should be counting people instead. If you have a large number of visits, then is it 1 person who visits your site 1,000 times, or is it 1,000 people who visit your site once? Number 6, for example, which is the time on the site. This is just is sometimes used as a poor substitute for actual engagement, and it's not very actionable unless you know what it is that people are doing on the site, because then that informs what are the important features, what features should we be marketing, what features are the core of the product that we're building. Again, the number of downloads, it's a good number because it affects the ranking on the App Store and those kinds of things, but it rarely will lead to actual value unless you can measure how many people are activated, how many people create accounts, how many people actually come back 1 week after they downloaded that value. So these are just a few vanity metrics that people track often. So we'll go into segments and cohorts because I think they're a fast way that you could begin to track the product analytics without needing a lot of complications. So a segment is a group of people that shares common characteristics. This could be users who use Chrome, users who use Safari, users who are on mobile, or guests who will make reservations versus those who walk in. If you're in a school setting, it could be parents who drive their kids to school or those who use a school bus, these kinds of things, these kinds of segmentations. And it's important to create user segments based off of technical and demographic information of interest. So if you're able to identify within your product what are the technical things of interest that you want to see how your users engage with, then you're able to compare them over time. So do users on Chrome have fewer purchases, for example? Do users on mobile have fewer purchases? Are your ghost users from a particular reason? And then you're able to see why that is happening. Then with cohorts, cohort analysis just simply enables you to compare similar groups over time. So as you're building and testing a product, you iterate constantly so that your users have different experiences. Your users in week 1 have a very different experience from the users who join your product in month 3, in month 4, in month 5. And each group of these users is very important because when you compare them over time, you're able to know whether things are improving, whether things are getting better. You're able to also identify what is important for your users. So this is an example that I'd want us to consider. We have a certain product here where in January, the total number of customers was 1,000. In February, it was 2,000. In March, it was 3,000. And you can see the trend. Then the average revenue per customer in January was 500. In March, it was 450. In April, it was 425. And in May, it was 450. Just so I can breathe, I'll ask, what do you guys see from this data? You can raise your hand or chat or just unmute for a minute. What do you see in this data in terms of this product? How are things going from January to May? There's a constant increase in the number of customers. Thank you, Marceline. Anyone else see something? Is there anything you can see in terms of the revenues? What would your comment be about the revenues? Or about how much everyone is spending, customers are spending.
Constant drop in the revenue.
There's a constant drop in the revenue. Interesting. Then Dennis Murage says there's a constant revenue. Simon says that the revenues keep fluctuating. So, okay, thank you guys for sharing that. But I think it's hard to tell what is really happening, and I'll show you in a minute. So we are not comparing old customers versus new one. This just combines the purchase of everyone. So it combines purchases of someone who joined in January with someone who joined in May. So for example, what we have in May as the average revenue per customer includes everyone from January to May. So let's try and break this month by month and see what the difference would be. So now we have the new users in January, the new users in Feb, the new users in March, the new users in April, and so on. Then we have this I hope you guys can see my mouse, my pointer, the arrow. Then you can see the total users per month. Then you can see how much the users spend by every individual month, right? So here we are trying to break down the customers by the month in which they started using the site. And let's assume this is an e-commerce site. So what do we see here that's different from maybe what we noticed in the initial slide? Do we see any difference? You can unmute, you can chat. What do we see? So I think while I wait, I think one thing that I see on my end is that, for example, customers who join on month 5, which is May, on average, how much they spend, nearly double those who join in month 1. Yeah, and that's huge growth. So we have the guys who joined in January spending 500 shillings in the first month. That's the month when they joined. Then in February, they spent 300, so their spending goes lower. Eventually in May, they spend 50 shillings. But for customers who join in May, which is month 5, they start by spending 900 shillings, which means and this has almost doubled in terms of how much people spent from the first month when we offered the product to when we are tracking this in month 5. And that's huge growth, right? So yeah, I see organic growth in terms of customers. Thanks, Peter. So if you and this goes back again to segmenting and cohorts, and I hope you can see why it's important to break down your users by different groupings of interest. I'll show you another example where we line up the users now by user experience. This is the number of months of use, and then let's see what interesting insights we can see from here. So what we are trying to say is that we have cohort 1, which is the people who joined in January, and cohort 5 would be, cohort 1, we are looking at the months of use. So we have, depending on month 1, month 2, month 3, and so on and so forth. So do we see something here? Do we see something interesting here? One of the interesting things to see would be, for example, how fast revenues decline after the first month. So the very initial users, they join the app today and they spend 500 shillings. Then in next month, they spend 300 shillings. Then we continue improving our product, then they spend 100 shillings less. For users who join in March, their spending in the first month is higher because we probably identified what it is that the customers want. And the change between month 1 to month 2 has also gone lower, right? Initially it was 200 shillings and now it's 100 shillings. And so cohort analysis helps us to have a clearer perspective. For instance, we can see that poor monetization in the first month dilutes overall revenues across the board. Just as we've seen in January, those who spend 500 in month 1, eventually by the time they're dropping off, they're spending 50 shillings. And those who join in April, they spend 800 shillings, then 700. And this means that the product that you're building, what we had when you looked at this, it looks as if things have stalled. It looks as if things are not doing well. But once you're able to segment by the different months, then you can see that you're actually flourishing in terms of your product. So cohort analysis and just segmentation allows you to see patterns throughout the product life cycle, and it also helps you to stop making assumptions about the natural life cycle of a customer. So you would think that customers will spend more over time and then maybe discover that their spending gets lower and lower over time. So then you start to ask yourself, what do we change in terms of the product that we are building? So, and cohort analysis is very easy, and you can do it for revenue, you can do it for churn, you can do it for support costs, you can do it for engagement, you can do it for any metric that is of interest, and you'll be able to see the trend, and you'll be able to make more informed choices and more informed decisions. So just a quick recap: with segments, we are comparing people by some attribute: age, gender, browser, device. With A/B testing, I don't think I mentioned A/B testing. Yeah, so with A/B testing and multivariate testing, with A/B testing, you change one thing. This could be the color of a button. This could be the call to action. It could be try this, start today versus begin today. It could be something like, hi, Marceline, we will share the slides. Yes, I'll share the slides after the session. So it could be color, it could be shape, it could be these kinds of things that affect a certain results like clicks and revenue. And then with multivariate testing, you're looking at changing different things at the same time in order to see which metrics correlate with what it is that you're tracking. So in terms of product analytics, we do two kinds of tests. There are longitudinal tests, which where you're comparing groups, like what we just did with the cohorts and the segments, since you're collecting data along a natural lifespan of a user. Then with cross-sectional tests, we offer different groups of users different experiences at the same time. So maybe half your users see a blue link and half see a green one, or half your users see a pink website and another half see a rose gold one. And then you're able to test how they work around your site at different intervals. So you can test everything about your product, but it's best to focus on critical steps within your user journey. So when you're mapping out your user journey, you can identify what do I want my customers to do along their journey, then you can use those as the key things to test across the product. So it could be you have a call to action, like get started for free, or try it out for free and then see how that works. Then with A/B tests, they seem relatively simple. They actually are relatively simple, but the biggest challenge with them is that you need quite a lot of data. So for you to be making sense with some of the A/B tests, you probably need the kind of data that Google or Facebook have, in terms of we changed the link to blue and now it's red. So if you do A/B testing, sometimes you might end up having more factors that you're trying to test than the traffic that's coming to your product. And multivariate testing comes in very key, because then it helps you to test many factors at once without delaying your production cycles or your learning cycles. Then multivariate testing relies heavily on statistical analysis. So you're able to identify which factors correlate strongly with each other, which factors correlate strongly with improving the metrics that you have, and which factors cause other factors to change. So a lot of product analytics is about finding a meaningful metric and then designing experiments to improve it until that metric is good enough for you to move to the next stage of building your product. This way, then you're able to identify a sustainable product model or business model that is repeatable and helps you to scale. So I think I'd like us to do a bit of an exercise. We still have some time. Yeah, so I'd like you to think about products that you've worked with before or products that you're currently working with, and just think about metrics that you track religiously, 3 to 5 things that you track or review frequently. You could write them down, you could chat them in the chat, and I'll give you a minute to do that. And you could even use, in case you're not actively involved in, product development, you could even use your social media, for example. If you have a community, it could be your mailing list, those kinds of things. So I'll give you a minute to, and you can chat in case you have any metrics that you track or review frequently. I think the minute is done. Has anyone been able to identify some metrics? Platform, mobile, web, etc. Okay, and then what do you track as metrics do you track frequently? Number of workshop participants, maybe number of signups, time. Okay. Okay. It could be signups, it could even be the vanity metrics that we've mentioned, and that's still good. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we'll move on. So assuming you've written some metrics or you've thought about some metrics, it could be feature requests. Interesting, thanks, Marcy. So which are good metrics and why do you think they are good metrics? Checkouts, I like that in terms of churn. Okay. So which are good metrics? If you're just what you've written, based on what you've written and what you've talked about. For example, with Mercy, I see the number of workshop participants. Is that a good metric and why? What does it, and you can answer for yourself because then it helps you build it doesn't have to be an answer that you share, but is it a good metrics? Does it help you achieve what it is that you want to achieve with the workshops that you put out? If you're looking at return customers, Caleb, is this a good metric and why? So if your product relies heavily on having customers return, then how often do they return? What can you do to make them return even more often, right? Checkouts, in terms, checkouts, I thought of churn. So with checkouts, is it a good metric? Does it add more money to your revenue and those kinds of things? Okay, so I like that. Unique visitors, what do the unique visitors inform you about the product? So once you identify metrics, then you know whether they're actionable or not. I'd like you to identify which of the metrics you've mentioned, which ones do you use to make decisions and which are vanity metrics. So in the chat, you could just write decisions and then maybe one metric and then a vanity metric that you've identified. Okay, let's see. I think for me, the biggest vanity metric that I identified after doing this process was number of emails, because you could have a mailing list as large as you can imagine, and maybe only 1% of the people actually click on your emails or even engage. So yeah, for me, I think the size of my mailing list at some point became a vanity metric. So have you been able to identify some vanity metrics? Okay. So which, and I hope just through this process, you will be able, or even when you take the slides and go through them, you'll be able to identify which metrics don't make sense for me to be tracking. And we said that a good metric is one that informs change. It's one that informs features that you build, right? And then have you probably identified new metrics that you need to add to the list that are more meaningful? So just take some time to think about it, a minute maybe, which metrics you need to stop tracking so often or putting so much energy into, and which new metrics to add onto your list. So for example, with Mika, I hope I pronounced that right, or Mika, I assume with checkouts, then you're dealing with an e-commerce platform or a platform where people are buying and selling. Are there new metrics that you should be considering, right? Let me see. With Dennis, who's talking about a mobile and web platform, are there new metrics that you now think would be important to be tracking? So yeah. And this is just metrics, right? You could be making a lot of money, you could have a lot of users, and having a lot of success. This was just to have that while we were doing the exercise. So I'm coming to the end of it, and I'll just walk us quickly through some pitfalls to avoid when you're digging through data, or just a few things to think about when you're trying to think like a data scientist for your product. The first thing is to never assume that your data is clean. There are always so many problems within data. You might have a bug that's causing 20% of the data to be null. You might have just problems within data that you didn't anticipate. So once you collect data, take some time to check if the data is clean, to check if the data is as you expect it. Then there are funny insects we call outliers, and they skew your data in many ways. So sometimes you want to avoid excluding outliers. So for example, if you ignore the 20 people who used your product 1,000 times a day, you might actually think that they're real humans and they are bots. or when you include these 20 people in a model that you're trying to generate to inform building your products, then it means you build a product for bots and not actual human beings. Then the other thing to avoid is, or to look into, is seasonality. So for example, if you're building LinkedIn and around August or September, there's a spike in intern as a job role. Does that mean that the fastest growing job of the year is intern? Maybe not. It could just be that at that month, a lot of people are on break with school and they're taking internships. So it's important to consider the time of day, the day of the week, the time of the month. So for example, if you're an e-commerce platform, towards the end of the month, maybe you have a spike in the number of people purchasing, and then this informs how you build your product or how you think about advertisements and those kinds of things. Then also ignoring size when you're reporting growth is a pitfall that you should try to avoid. So during initial stages, you have your friends, your family signing up as for your platform, right? Because they're around you and you've probably bullied them into signing up. But this doesn't really count as your user base doubling, especially if they don't do what it is that you want your ideal user to be doing. Then the other thing is data vomit, and a dashboard isn't of much use if you don't know where to look. So if you're measuring Vanity Metrics and you've spent time building this fancy dashboard that doesn't really help you know how well your product is doing or what it is that you need to iterate, then it's just a cute bit of data vomit. So I've come to the end of my presentation. And data is a powerful thing, and like any other powerful thing, it can be addictive to use, especially when you see changes. When you see, for example, if I change this color of her skirt to pink, if I have more users on the platform, then it becomes addictive. You might overanalyze things. So data is only great for testing hypotheses, but it's lousy for generating new ones. So we have to learn to combine data with introspection, to combine it with our experience and with our intuition. And then that way we are able to have full development cycles that are then that hit the bullseye, that they are very centered on data, they're centered on what it is we're trying to build, they're centered on what our users actually need. So normally this takes quite a bit of time, because then we would just, after this introduction, we would go through the different models. So maybe sit down with the guys who are doing e-commerce and then go through the different metrics to track. If you're dealing with a mobile app, the things to track and all that. But that's all the time we had for today. Hopefully we can plan this with MJ in the future, just based off of the products that you focus on internally, and we can have a more in-depth conversation about it. But that's it from me. You can find me on Twitter at Muthoni, or on LinkedIn as Muthoni Wanyoike, or that's my email. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thanks, Mercy, for the invite. Thanks, everyone who's participated and connected. I hope to hear from you soon. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Muthoni. Thank you so much for, putting this together. Truly appreciate it. Muthoni is an engineer in residence at AT Labs, Africa's Talking Labs, and she's also the co-organizer of Nairobi Women in Machine Learning and Data Science. She's very passionate about AI in the continent, and I hope we've been able to see that in this presentation. So thanks so much, Tabs. Hopefully people will connect with you on Twitter and on email and the presentation itself. Thank you so much.